Hello, this is Ken Ferry with this week's Boots in the Field report. This week was a big week for almost everyone, even with elevator backups and wet corn. A lot of customers are dragging themselves across the finish line, or at least can see the finish line. Getting harvest reports as well as overall takes on this crop as the season wraps up. Talking with Joe up in north central Iowa. He believes harvest is probably about 80% finished. The June corn up there is off pace with the May corn. It's in that 180 range and that 22% moisture. He said on his farm the difference between tile and no tile is about 30 bushel up there. Some LP shortages yet, still slowing harvest, but field conditions are probably the biggest factor right now. Keeping the trucks on the road and trying to get the grain out of the field. And not carve the fields up too much. Not a lot of tillage being done, and the livestock guys are really struggling, he said, to get bedding made due to the wet conditions. But the frost is now out, so if they can get a dry spell, tillage is still possible after harvest. Talking with Gary Rabideau at Ritchie Grain up in Wilmington, he believes they're 90 to 95% done. They have been running their dryers nonstop around the clock. Now, this is a big improvement over last week, but then again, they only had 40 to 50% of their acres of corn planted, so they didn't have as much to go. Crop reports coming in that 180 range, 20 to 27% on moisture, and again, dealing with light test weights. Here at Hayworth, I would say we're also 90% finished. A lot of anhydrous got applied this week, as well as tillage being done. Growers who have enough equipment and help, the tillage followed up the combine pretty close. For those who didn't have that luxury, they're going to be at the mercy of the weather from here on out and whether we can get this tillage done. Guys down in New Berlin area say the harvest is over. Corn yields were better than they expected, only 5 to 10% behind last year. Soybeans were about what they expected, in that 10 to 15% behind last year. And they believe tillage is probably 85% done there. The guys in Blue Mound say the area is probably 99% done with harvest. They said corn ended up better than they expected, again 10 to 15% behind a year ago. Beans were 15 to 20% behind last year. Some of the early beans ended up shorter, and some wanted to shatter in the field, but overall they were, I guess, coming in where they expected. Tillage is pretty much done. The guys are now working on the fall burn down. This week was a big week in the plot harvest. Looking over the paperwork from Friday through Monday, I weighed over 240 scale loads myself. Yesterday we harvested our last of the 2019 plots, assuming we didn't forget any. So if you're waiting for us to help harvest a plot, you need to call the office, because by our records, we show that we're finished. We saw some interesting numbers this week in the plots, which are mainly June planted plots that were taken out. Where the June corn didn't receive the August yields or the August rains, the yields are in that 140, 180 range. Where the June corn didn't make black layer before the frost, we're in that 120 to 160 range with the light test weights. Here at Hayworth, where we got the August range, June corn is in that 220, 260 range in that 23, 26% moisture. In one of our May 18th planted starter additive plots, where we're looking at 8 different additives to put in the in-furrow starter, there were some differences in the additives, and we'll dig that out as we work through the data, but the most interesting thing, I think, was the moisture response. Some of the treatments compared to the checks, while they had a 7 to 15 bushel better in yield, there is as much as a 1.5 drier corn. Now, it's not uncommon to see a half a point. I'm not sure I've ever seen a 1.5. These treatments were bumping 270 bushel number 2 corn. So we paid for most of the starter just in drying cost. Yields in this plot range from 237 to 272. It'll be interesting to dig deep in this plot to see if we can figure out what caused this response. Shorty, our planter operator, thinks it all comes down to how well the planter operator made the planter dance. And believe me, the day we planted this plot, he had to make it dance. Shorty was doing the Kinsey two-step. We took out a starter placement plot planted on June 3rd, looked at 8 different starter placements. Yields in that plot ranged a little tighter from only 240 to 252. Some small differences did show up, but we will have to dig into that one and dissect it to see if they're for real. In another June planted plot, we were changing nitrogen rates on the planter from 0 to 60 pounds and doing it both in UAN and ammonium nitrate. This was coupled with a number of different application methods. As we changed the rates on the planter, we adjusted the side dress rate so we'd keep the total nitrogen rate the same. Yields in this plot range from 222 to 237. This plot did respond to higher N rates at the planter. So this too is a surprise because we planted it after the big rains had quit. We harvested a planter closing wheel plot and it ran from 220 to 258. Yield swings were by management zones, so we'll have to take a close look at each management zone to pull this data out. The guys are cranking on the plots to get this results ready for our January-February meetings. While we're behind normal, we're still ahead of 2009 when we didn't finish harvesting until like December 8th. So don't forget our hand harvest December 18th, the basics the 19th and 20th. The plot crew and I will be headed to the woods this weekend to do our part in helping to control the state's deer population. To all of you who are joining in this venture, I wish you a safe and bountiful hunt. To stay up to date, check out our website at croptechinc.com and subscribe to our podcast, Boots in the Field Report. Keep her safe, keep her moving.